The Cobra was the mission commander out in the AO. So he had control of his scout to provide cover for him. And the scout would, as he found things, is this mine?
Yeah.
He would call up spot reports. In the front seat of the Cobra had a grease pencil, and he'd write them on the windshield. You know, I got a 3x5 bunker. It looks like it's been used. The scout pilots could tell when trails had been used in the last 24 hours, 48 hours. They hadn't been used in a while. They were just like the Indian scout on the ground, except they were in a helicopter. Once he found something, depending on what it was, he might just have me shoot. We were working in triple canopy jungle mostly. So he might drop a smoke and say, shoot some rockets in there. And I'd shoot rockets to blow the vegetation away so we could get a better look. Scout would go back in and look. I could put artillery fire. Again, the backseater, who was aircraft commander, had frequencies for artillery, and we always had artillery support somewhere in the AO. They always supported us. So I'd call and say, I want you to fire on this grid. And you give them a grid coordinate, and you'd adjust his fire. So you'd throw a bunch of artillery in to blow it apart. And this is also what would you do obviously if the scout took fire. Shoot my rockets, call for artillery, let them shoot at it, let the scout go back in. It was continuous. After you did something, the scout would go back in and see what you did. We also had frequencies for Air Force facts. So we could call them and say, their call sign was Rash, Rash 16, and we knew who was in our area that day. We say, what do you have on call today? And he'd say, well, I've got 4 F4s out of Benoit that can be here in 15 minutes. And we say, okay, here's what we got. And he'd call his F4s up, and they'd drop bombs on it. So that was another way to do it. If there was something that warranted looking on the ground, we'd find it, again, the Cobra would find an LZ, Scout would scout it out. We'd call back to ops and say, bounce the blues, and we'd have a flight of 6 Hueys with our blues on board, put them in LZ, let them walk in and do a ground recon, and maybe establish contact with the enemy. So we could do that. If we found an extensive bunker complex or weapons complex, rice complex where they were hiding rice, which I've got films of, we could put a B-52 strike in. That came later. That was probably, you told the division, here's what we have. They'd say, they think that warrants a B-52 strike. That might go in that night or the next day. And a lot of times we would sit and watch the B-52 strike go in, because as soon as it went in, the scout would go in and do a recon, see what the damage was. So that's what I mean by developing the situation. A lot of times we had ground units already on the ground. Infantry, we also had armor, so that if they were close enough, you could even call up that frequency and say, here's what we got, can you guys get in here? So there was all kinds of things, and again, that aircraft commander in the backseat of the Cobra was the one that ran the mission.
I marvel at how the Vietnamese were able to stay in the war when you just talked about some amazing capabilities and coordination.
Yeah. I
mean, that is the ability to bring in whatever you needed from a B-52 to a machine, to an M16 in your lap.
Right. To F4s.
To F4s, everything in between.
Air Force, everything in between. Artillery.
That is really amazing. Though, how much of these tactics that you just described were taught stateside versus OJT in the field?
Very little. You learned all that once you were in Vietnam, especially being the backseat of aircraft commander in the backseat of the Cobra. That took me until I think I made AC, and it was while we were in Cambodia in May or June, right then. So February, March, April, May. I spent 3 months flying front seat of the Cobra to learn the mission. And by that time I was ready to go and move to the back seat and be able to run all the mission.
The one thing about a Cobra that always amazed me is that it's only 18 inches wide.
Yeah, it's very narrow.
Wow.
The fuselage is only 18 inches wide.
I did not know that. I knew it was narrow, but my lord,
I've got good pictures of those too.
That's incredible.
But that gets away from my scout career, because I didn't, again, I
Yes,
started
scout.
Yeah, so how long did you remain scout?
Until he got shot down how many
Remember
times?
March,
I called him magnet ass.
March 4th, I had a very short scout career. March 4th and 6th, I was shot down. I shot down twice in 3 days. And this is as observer. You know, I had nothing to do with my survival. I wish you could talk to the aircraft commanders that I was learning to fly scouts from. That's the reason I'm here today, is because of them. Just outstanding pilots. And I don't know how many times I flew with two different guys that I got shot down with. I don't know, they were shot down numerous times before they were shot down with me. So let me just get, I can get to the, that's the inside of it. We just slipped on cots with mosquito netting around it.
Was malarial type diseases pretty prevalent?
Yeah, we took malaria pills every day.
Okay.
Nobody ever got it.
I like the mustache.
He looks the same, doesn't he?
Should have kept the mustache, right?
I kept it for a long time.
Well, he grew it back during COVID too.
I kept it for a long time. One of the guys I flew with, one of the scout pilots I flew with, teaching me. I still see him too. We have unit reunions every year.
So who is that? If you don't like
It's Ron Black.
Okay.
He's one of the guys. He's number 3 there in the hooch.
Okay.
So I went into the scout hooch. So after I met the unit commander. He says, "You're gonna fly scouts." I got my transition. The first night, it's dark. I just came to the unit and I walk into this hooch, and the guy sitting in my hooch. There's only one other guy sitting in there, a scout pilot. He's got his arm all wrapped up because he'd been shot down, and he was a weird guy. Anyway, extremely weird. And you know, I asked the dumb question. Well, what's it like flying scouts? You know,
It's like, I wasn't this weird 3 months ago.
I mean, I was scared to death. I was scared to death.
Yeah.
Especially seeing that guy.
Well, and he introduced me to one guy. I went to one of the reunions, and when the guy walked away, he said, "I think he was in front, and his very first flight, didn't his co-pilot get shot and killed?
Yes.
Jeez.
One of
His
the.
first flight, his first day in
He
Vietnam."
was a front seat in the Cobra, new guy. They took a 51 caliber, and the round came right up through and hit his aircraft commander and went right up his leg and severed his,
From his femoral artery.
femoral artery. And he died instantly.
Oh.
And then the front seat had to fly it home and help pull him out. Stuff like that.
So,
Just
I noticed on the hooch there,
yes,
that was Scout hooch, right?
yes.
The names are in white versus in red.
Yeah.
Earlier. Now is that the red, white, and blue?
Oh, that's a good question. The gun platoon might have been red, because again, the platoon leader for the guns was called Red, Apache Red. Apache was our call sign.
Yeah.
When I became aircraft commander, Apache 25 was my call sign. The scout platoon leader was called White. He was Apache White when he used it in the AO. And of course, the blue platoon leader was called Blue. And we called everybody by their call signs. There were guys, scouts, I didn't know what their damn name was, but I knew he was Apache 2-3 or
Right.
Apache 1-6. Scouts were in the 10s, guns were in the 20s, lift were in the 30s.
I'll see. Okay.
Yeah, that's a mess hall. Again, this is just a little primitive. That's the officers' club.
That's rock.
So it's okay being a warrant officer there, I
We had a
guess.
little bar in there, and guys would come in and have a beer at the end of the day if they wanted. A couple bunkers. These are bunkers you could get inside if you wanted to put up with the rats and stuff. That was our commander's bunker. He had a little better protection than we did.
Yeah.
More sandbags.
A lot of sandbags there. And this is our tactical operations center, which is obviously well sandbagged. That's where we go for our briefings. All the maps were in there, all the radios were in there. You can see the culverts up on top. When a mortar was dropped in, hopefully it would hit that and spray, and you wouldn't have a direct hit on the sandbags. Just more protection.
That's what that's for.
It set the
Yes,
round
yeah.
off, with the deals on top. That's a shower point.
Yeah, the water
Oh,
on the right.
okay.
That's a 4 or 5 holder and a
Toilets.
latrine. And you can see the perimeter is right behind us. That's the perimeter.
And that's where they put the outhouse.
So when you went out at 10 o'clock at night to go take a leak, you were going out to the perimeter.
Yes.
We had one mountain at tandem. It's called Nui Badin, it was flat, completely flat in 3-core. But this is the only mountain. I assume it's volcanic. I never know, but it's the only mountain in the area. And we owned the top. I got a picture of it. We had a communications the unit up on top. Of course, we were here. Viet Cong owned the middle.
Hmm.
They would throw mortars from the middle of that mountain at us. And there's another picture of it.
What a stark contrast from the World War II vets I've interviewed, where there was a front line
Yeah,
and there
yeah.
was a safe zone behind there. And here you just showed a picture you could look at where they have it's like gangs, rival gangs
Yeah.
that had control of areas.
There was no front, the Viet Cong and NVA was all over.
Yeah.
And again, that's the top of the mountain. Here's a picture of the top. There's the communications up on top. There's a helipad right here. You can see it. You can see the purple residue of purple smoke that Huey probably just landed in there and took off.
I mean, that to me looks like terrible duty. Was that a bad place to be, or are they left alone?
I don't remember them getting attacked because it's tough to come up a hill like that, to attack
Can't really shoot up.
a perimeter like that. So I don't know, to tell you the truth.
Interesting.
But they were obviously isolated. The only way they could get off there is with a helicopter.
Yeah.
So.
And they held the high ground, so yeah.
That's another unique picture I took of that. That's the perimeter. During the day, about every 5 bunkers, they'd put a guy on top of it. You can see the guy sitting there. At night, every bunker was manned. And they were armed to the teeth.
I bet.
Another bunker. That's our Apache. We had our own tower for communications coming into the flight line and landing. And that's our flight line again. This could have been when we started going into Cambodia, because none of the Cobras are there. These L-shaped revetments are where the helicopters parked. Again, to provide mortar protection, some side protection.
Do you mean that you literally had a base in Cambodia, or are you talking about?
Well,
what do you mean by going into Cambodia?
By the invasion?
Yeah.
That was the authorized invasion that Nixon had for Cambodia.
Yep.
No, there were fire bases in Cambodia, and there was anywhere we went, they would move an artillery battery and set up a base so they could support the ground troops going into Cambodia. But there were no living quarters anywhere during that 2 months, because it was only May and June of 70 that
Interesting.
we invaded Cambodia. There's another close picture. That's the big refuel point over on the other part of the base. All the refuel tanks were underground.
You can see the helicopters coming
They're coming in to land. You'd land on the pad and refuel your own helicopter. We pretty much we always refueled our own.
Do you remember how many gallons that you had to put
We
in?
carried 1,100 pounds. So divide that by what, 6 pounds a gallon. That's all we could carry in the Cobra. I think the capability was 1,600 pounds. But we couldn't carry a few.
183 gallons.
Or 83 gallons?
Because of the temperatures, the dust and the dirt and the environment we flew in, and the load we carried, the high density altitudes, you couldn't carry a full load of fuel and a full load of rockets. You'll see the load of rockets we carried. We did carry this is a hospital, what do you call it, forward-based hospital, something more than a dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a little while there. More shots of the perimeter. Okay, this is the second place when I talk about Song Bay. This is the second place we lived.
Mm.
It also had one single mountain, this one, Nui Ba Ra. Same thing, except the VC owned the whole thing.
Ah.
We didn't go there. This is another picture of it. This is how close we were to it. This is another L-shaped revetment and one of our Cobras.
Did you ever? I know that the VC were very capable guerrilla fighters.
Oh, absolutely.
Did they ever break discipline and you could see them once in a while, or were they always undercover?
Me flying a Cobra.
Yeah.
I never saw any except dead ones laying on a trail.
Yeah.
I never, because we always flew at altitude. Scouts saw them. Scouts would shoot at them, and of course they'd get shot at.
Although the local, like the women and children and stuff, didn't shoot with the village people.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
They plowed their rice fields in the daytime, and they were Viet Cong at night.
Yep.
Yeah. Same old story. This is the base at Song Bay, and you see how much smaller it is. It's much smaller. And this is before they built us a troop area, because we were gonna move here permanently. They built our troop area right here right in this area, where you can see a little bit of the outline.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they built our troop area. There's a little airstrip, right here. I think you can see the tail of a 130 sitting there. 130s were flying out of there for supplies. There's another good picture of it, and again, this is before our troop area was built. This is where they built it, and the engineers came in there and built that thing in a couple of weeks. Here's our troop area now.
Was that supposed to be it looks like there's lettering down there? Or is that just
It was the plow guys that
Just-
were
okay.
playing,
okay? Yeah. All right.
because they pushed away all the vegetation
Yeah.
away from the perimeter.
Okay.
Again, here's the perimeter, not nearly as secure as it was at Tandem.
Mm.
Here's our hooches right here.
Mm.
That's where I lived. I lived in one of these right here, right next to the perimeter, which
Man.
again made me a little nervous.
Yeah.
Before they had our quarters built, this is what we lived in for a temporary type deal. This isn't too good a picture there, but
Is that the scout plane helicopter?
this is Scout.
Okay.
That's the 086. And before we got there, because of the size of this fire base, there couldn't be any permanent structures on this fire base. So they all lived in tents. All the infantry guys all permanently lived in these tents. That was a little hard to do. Here were our quarters. I got a little better picture. Yeah, there they are. They're culverts. We call them sewer culverts. That the engineers just came in, dropped those in, pushed some dirt up on top for mortar protection, put some wood on the end, and that was it. Put some floorboards in, and that was where we lived.
Was there a monsoon season in Vietnam?
Yes, I think it was probably wintertime, November. I want to say November, December, January, February.
So there were blocks of time where it was just raining all the time, and you
Yep.
needed the duck boards and everything.
Yep. I
Okay.
got a good picture of that. too.
Okay. Cool.
Here's my hooch. I laid a locker on its side. You got kind of
Well, hold on. Do you still have any of those things, like that little wind-up clock or anything like that?
no.
Okay, it's all gone.
No, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
Well, you saved the clock from the
Oh,
helicopter that you
Well,
shot down.
that's another story.
Yeah.
I was the one that had the engine failure in.
Yeah.
Guys saved the clock for me. But anyway, that's all my stuff. That's another my cots over here on the left. They weren't bad. And Song Bay was a little bit higher altitude, so it was a little cooler than it was down in Tainan. Tainan was hot.
Mhm.
Song Bay, because it was probably 2,000 feet, made it a little more livable.
Mhm.
Guys would build structures on the back, make a back porch. Well, there's a shower point and the 3 or 4 holder and the latrine. That's our mess hall.
Mm.
The mess hall, and again, this is as far as we got was construction. That's all there was.
What was the food like in the mess hall?
Yeah, it was good.
It wasn't
We did a
bad.
good job. Yeah, we had a hot meal morning and evening, and then we took a box of seed rations if we wanted something as for lunch. Wasn't bad though.
Hmm.
Not bad at all.
A rainbow.
Yeah. In the middle of a war zone.
Little rainbow there, a little rain going on between there. And they were building it off. We were trying to build an officers club there. Again, that's a little dispensary.
Like to
My dad
have.
on the right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all wore caveats.
That's cool. Yeah. All right.
There's another artillery, again, on the corner of Song Bay, they had an artillery, which again supported us in the AO. Here's the rain.
Mm.
There's our laundry out in the...
Out in the rain.
We had hooch maids, Vietnamese locals that came in and cleaned the hooches and did our laundry, and they were paid to do that.
Hmm.
Some of the guys I flew with, unfortunately, him were killed after our left.
Oh.
3 out of the 5. Boyle's the guy that wrote the book, and he built his own bathtub. Back in there, heated up the water, used rubber blivet, cut it in half for the tub. That was the way he was. This gives you an idea when you talk about, how did we not control the Viet Cong or the NVA. This is looking from the Cambodian border back to Nui Ba Ra, which is where we were based.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives you an idea of the terrain. This is all triple canopy jungle, and when I say that, I mean you have your ground cover, you got a little intermediate trees, and you've got the 150-foot trees, all triple canopy. You can drive trucks onto this and not see it unless you're a scout, kind of going low and slow, blowing the trees away, looking straight down, and that's when they pick out stuff. Unbelievable how dense it was.
That's were they still using Agent Orange when you were there?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Extensively.
Okay.
Yeah, there were large areas that were just trees were bare. You know,
Yeah.
they hadn't done it there yet.
Yeah.
They just hadn't done it there yet. And there's a little better picture. There's a little stream along here. Yeah, it just shows how dense it is.
It, you know, if it weren't for the war, it looks kind of pretty.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I mean, it looks really nice.
Beautiful country.
Yeah.
We would be scouting along a stream like this, where it was a little higher terrain, and you see a lodge, a French hunting lodge,
Really.
sitting up on the top of a ridge line.
Yeah.
Just a beautiful.
Hmm.
Because obviously the French were there before we were. There's more scout mission. You can see the guy here in the river. Supposedly the scout determined he had weapons on board, and we fired at him and blew that out of the water.
Huh.
I don't have any pictures of that, but he didn't survive. There's another good picture of him. Another picture of the Cobra.
Yeah, it's nice.
See on the front seat, back seat.
Oh wow, that's even better.
We had one Cobra had this painting we got from another unit. I mean the Flying Tiger type. And this was the unit I mentioned at Tandem. There was the second of the 20th. It's an aerial rocket artillery unit. You see, it's just 2 Cobras. All they did was load up on rockets, and they were also another unit. If we wanted to develop a situation, we could call back and say, send out a couple of ARA birds. They would come and just shoot rockets and expend their whole load on an area that we wanted them to, because we wouldn't expend other than protecting the scout.
How accurate were those rockets?
You got pretty good with them. Yeah, it was not a point weapon. You know, there were times when the Viet Cong would have a 51 caliber pit. They would dig a pit, mount a 51 caliber in the pit, and they'd be up to their shoulders in the dugout. So it would be about probably as big around as this table, and they shoot at us. And there was one time when we had about 5 or 6 Cobras flying on a wagon wheel, taking turns, shooting at this 51 cal to try to hit it. And as the Cobra would roll out, the 51 cal would open up, and nobody could get a rocket in the pit.
Yeah, and
It was an area fire weapon.
there's a little bit of courage going on in that 51 cal gunner too to fire after that. I think I would have just laid low and just let the helicopters go away.
And I say 51, the NVA weapon was a 51 caliber, same as a 50 caliber for us. That was the main threat the Cobra had, was the 50 caliber, because that can shoot 3,000, 4,000 feet, be very accurate. Other than it was only eyesight. They had no radar, no nothing. It was just he's up there putting his sight on you, and they were terrible at that. So the Cobras were pretty safe. That's me in the back seat.
That's a trip. So what sort of armor did they have around you?
You sat in an armor seat, you can see that,
Okay.
and you sat on one. It was armor plated on the bottom, and that was all. You wore what we call the chicken plated, armor plated vest. That's what this is hanging here. Very heavy, probably weighed 20 pounds on the whatever type of metal, or I say metal.
Some sort of bulletproof material
bulletproof.
of some sort,
It was
like a
bulletproof,
ceramic
probably
plate
up
or
to,
something.
Maybe a 30 cal it might have, but definitely small arms fire.
Yeah.
And you had a flak vest in back. So there wasn't a whole lot of protection.
Did your chopper have a name?
Oh, that.
Yeah.
No.
Pinky?
That's Punky's dilemma.
Monkey's Dilemma.
We'd come up with saying, why can't we name our helicopter? Why can't we put our names on the side of it? Why can't it say Commander Timeless or Warren or CW2 Timeless?
Did you keep the same helicopter though? Was that
No.
okay? So you would
We
cycle out of them.
we tried to do that, and maintenance wise and everything, it never worked. So
Yeah.
you just grabbed whatever one you were assigned.
Was there a significant difference between choppers and their handling capabilities?
Not much. Most of them flew pretty similar, and they were air conditioned too, because
Oh.
it's all enclosed.
I didn't know that.
plexiglass.
Really?
So they were air conditioned. It was very pleasant.
How be?
But you can see here's a load of rockets. That's a half a load that we normally carried in the main pods. On the outboard pods, we usually carried well, those are 17-pound rockets, similar to a 155 artillery shell. The outboards, a lot of times we would carry flechettes, which we'd fire at 1,500 feet, and it would fire like a shotgun, and fire all the flechettes. A great anti-personnel weapon. So we usually carried those in the outboard.
I never heard of that.
Yeah.
So you would it was kind of like grape shot.
Yes.
I'll be.
All they were little darts, thousands of darts
Yeah.
in the warhead. And if you ever had people in the open, it was
Devastating.
nasty.
What about on the front? Is that a gun turret
Yeah,
as well?
that's a turret. Again, that had a 7.62 millimeter Gatling gun and a 40 millimeter grenade launcher.
Yeah, it's some real serious firepower. Gatling
Yes.
gun is pretty wicked.
Oh, it was, that fired 4,000 rounds a minute, capable of firing that. It was just a.
Yeah. Huh.
How many rounds did you carry?
Probably to half, probably 2,000 rounds.
Y'all kids.
That's me getting ready to go fly. That's with the chicken plate on, our survival equipment. I carried a 38, and I've got an M16 we put in the ammo bay. Remember this ammo bay door too, and I'll talk about that
Yeah.
later.
That comes later.
That comes later when the second time I was shot down. That's what I flew out on.
And what it was written in the book, actually.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
That's my back seat. This is one Cobra had a 20 millimeter Gatling gun,
Oh,
which
my.
was a serious, very serious weapon. The Apaches now have a 20 or a 30 millimeter Gatling gun in the turret, so they can turn the turret and fire that. We had to fly the helicopter. Back seat fired that, and you had to point it just like you did the rockets. But that was an awesome weapon too.
So when you were firing these weapons, what impact did it have on? Could you feel them going off?
Oh, absolutely. That you could.
Yeah.
That you had to slowly put in pedal because it would turn the helicopter as you fired it. So you'd have to put in right pedal to compensate for that gun, that fire.
It would actually create to
Oh, it would
yaw.
make you
and then-
yaw.
I'll be.
Yeah. It was a powerful gun and it was very effective. That's the back seat. That's the front seat.
And so are you going to talk about this at some point about the division of labor between the two of you?
Yeah. Again, the back seat, I flew all the time.
Mhm.
Front seater, here's the sight he had that would come off and he'd have it between his legs. And he had a sight, and hold the trigger, and wherever he pointed that is where the turret went. And the turret went probably, I want to say 190 degrees total. You could go a little more left and right than 180 degrees. So he could fire both the minigun and the 40 millimeter grenade launcher from the front seat. That was his job. A lot of times you'd make a rocket run, fire the rockets, pull out at 500 feet, and he would fire the turret as cover as we were pulling out, going back to altitude. And that's the scout. Again, it was normally a pilot command sat on the right. He had a gunner in the back seat with an M60 in his lap to provide immediate fire suppression if they took fire or saw somebody.
That looks. I mean, what's the idea? Yeah, it looks like the last thing you'd want to fly is a scout, other than the fact that it was nimble.
It was extremely maneuverable.
Hi,
This is Maddie, my number 4.
hi, Maddie.
It was extremely maneuverable and very crash worthy. We crashed a lot of them and a lot of survived.
No kidding.
It was kind of an eggshell, so
Yeah.
it was great to crash.
Oh, jeez.
Big bounce.
What an amazing design feature. Wow.
Very survivable.
Huh.
There's a picture from the rear, and they sat in parallel revetments again for protection.
Yeah.
Okay, now we start my experience flying scouts. Again, after I got my transition, I probably only flew 2 or 3 days as observer. This is March 3rd.
Okay.
Which ironically is the day my sister was born in 1972.
Yes.
But nonetheless, she'll be 50 in a couple weeks.
But I'm just sitting in the left seat observing her, the experienced scout, how he flies scouts, and I'm trying to see what he sees. Because you can see the cyclic there is what's in the picture. I'm shooting across his lap
Wow.
and taking pictures, and I'm trying to see what he's seeing.
So really quick, he's flying. He's in the
Yep.
mate. You're in the
Left seat.
left seat, the other one.
He's making right-hand circles.
And then so you can see, but you can also shoot across where
No,
he's sitting.
I'm
You were
over
doing
there.
this way, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm really, the only reason I had that M16 was once we were on the ground.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha.
So this is March 3rd. I'm just enjoying the heck out of watching this guy fly a scout mission.
Yeah.
And again, I'm taking these pictures across him, just looking at his right-hand door. I'm in the left seat. That's a hoot. That's the top of a hooch here. It's a little hard to see.
Huh.
That's what the white thing is here. This whole area was an extensive supply area for rice, weapons. We're right on the Cambodian border. And one of our scouts found it a couple days before. We worked this area for days and days because we found hooch after hooch and bunker after bunker with bags of rice. It was extensive, and that's what we were looking at here. There's another picture here. You can see the wooden tops
Now you can see it
to
better.
that. Again, what they do is dig a bunker, probably as big as this room, make it about 4 or 5 feet deep, maybe put a roof on it, and then that's where they store all the rice and the weapons. And that's what we're looking at there.
And so you said this was March
March 3rd,
1960,
1970.
1970.
I've been in country a couple of weeks.
2 weeks.
Got it. Thank
Since
you.
February 15th.
Got it.
Learning how to fly scouts. Now you can see artillery has gone in here. There might have even been an Air Force strike gone in here because you can see all this is blown away. That's more bags of rice right here.
Oh wow.
Again, that's what the airstrikes and the artillery do is blow that vegetation away so you can see.
Yeah.
And also eventually they put ground troops in here and they did ground recons and we started hauling rice out of there. So we've been working this area for quite a while. March 4th I went out and believe it or not, the aircraft commander I was flying with put me in the right seat. He says, "Jim, you're flying the mission today," which I couldn't believe. I mean, I've been watching a couple of days, and he put me in the right seat that I was going to fly the mission on March 4th. As we got out in the AO and started, our intercom between the two of us wasn't working right. So he said, "We can't have this," So we landed at a fire base. He moved into the right seat. I got back in the left seat, and then we got shot down that day.
Are you going to talk more about that?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right.
Those were our blues. Again, just an infantry guy going to get on a Huey.
Well, hold on. Could you back up one?
Yeah. Oh,
The one where the guys are
yeah.
coming out of the.
Let's call them McGuire rigs. That's another way they could put them into an LZ if it wasn't big enough to land the Huey. They'd hang them from ropes and drop them and take them into an LZ, a real small area. Drop them in like that. They were practicing here.
Can you imagine?
No.
You're 22 years old.
Maybe I could
Some
have.
of these guys were 19.
Oh,
Yeah.
these guys are probably 17, 18, 19 that were on the ground.
I mean, really, all you guys are nuts. I mean, you got a scout plane in an eggshell.
Yeah.
You got this little narrow Cobra. You got guys.
Wait till you hear about his crash.
Oh my gosh.
Is it this one or is it another one? Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, this is what we had for an immediate reaction force. For downed aircraft, they would immediately, these guys would load up and come out and land and come in and pick you up, if they could. Here's friendly forces right here. You can see these guys walking in here.
Mm-hmm.
We were supporting them. And so while they do all the ground recon, we go to the perimeter and search further out, either try to find new stuff, make sure somebody wasn't sneaking in on them. Basically, we help protect them. To see if we could take fire or see somebody coming in on them.
That's an amazing advantage to be able to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
That's incredible.
they loved us.
Yeah.
And when we were there,
You
they
heard
knew,
the chopper coming.
That's
they
a-
knew
yeah.
that we were out scouting the area around them to ensure that somebody didn't come in on them or a big force didn't come in on them. Here you can see much more of how it's been all blown away. Those are bomb craters. More guys on the ground. There's more bags of rice.
With these, the artillery, is this artillery?
It could have been that or airstrikes.
Gotcha.
Could have been either one. I'm not sure which one it was. One more unique thing. There's more rice bags over here. You can see.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a huge supply complex. Also, you'll note right here, there's a dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's a sniffer dog. He would sniff out the Viet Cong. And March 4th, after I got back in the left seat as observer, their dog was alerted. We knew he was alerting. We called him on the FM radio. He would talk to them and told the scout, he said, our dog is alerted. So we knew somebody was in the area. So the pilot started working out further from him, and we found another bunker, another hooch that he could see. It was the roof, really. And he came to a hover over it, and he was talking to the guys on the ground. He says, if you can hear me, he says, you can pick up an azimuth of about 240. I've got another complex here of hooches, and I can't tell what's underneath, but you know, they're probably, I don't know how far away they were, a couple hundred meters, 500 meters maybe, quite a ways still. But we said, and we're at a hover doing this, we're at a 175-foot hover because that's how tall the trees were. While we were at a hover, we started taking fire.
Mm.
And it had to be somebody right underneath us because it was so dense, you didn't have it. You couldn't fire at an angle. So he was right underneath us. I was so new, when we started taking fire, I thought our back seat was firing his M60. I jerked around and looked at him.
Right.
And it was a 30 caliber that was right underneath us. And again, I didn't know what a 30 caliber sounded like. And so I jerked back, I look at him, he's not firing. And right then, the right sailor is screaming into this, I'm taking fire, telling the Cobra. And they shot our tail rotor out. So we're at a hover and they shot our tail rotor out. And I don't know if you're familiar with a helicopter. The tail rotor is for directional control, anti-torque. So as soon as you lose your tail rotor or hover, you start spinning. We started spinning like mad. Everything's a blur.
What was going through your mind?
You know, not much.
Really?
It was so quick. I didn't think of a thing. I dropped my smoke grenade.
Yeah. Okay. So you did that.
And believe it or not, I fired my M16 when we were spinning. And I later learned, the guy in the back seat, he says, I didn't want to fire my M60 because we had friendlies in the area, you know. And I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't have either. But I didn't know any better. I just absolutely did not know what was going on. So we took fire, we're spinning, and we start going down. He tried to fly out of it, you know, because you could see him dip over, but you can't fly out of it. If you're streamlined and you lose the tail rotor, you can do some procedures to land. But at a hover, you're just spinning and there's nothing you can do. So everything's a blur. We're going down. And probably 20, 30 feet above the ground, you roll the throttle off, which reduces your torque and slows your rotation. But also that reduces RPM once you do that. So as he settles, you pull in the collective, which puts more pitch in the blades to cushion the touchdown. You're trying to cushion the touchdown. And that's what he did. And I think the rotor wash blew stuff down and away from us. Because as we're spinning, if we would have hit a tree, we would have gone upside down. We would have all died, I'm sure.
But mind you, also, whoever shot them was right.
Yeah, well,
He
he's got shot
he
down.
had to be
Yeah.
right underneath us. He had to be
Yeah.
right underneath us.
So how, you had mentioned that there's canopy roughly 150 feet,
Mm-hmm.
and then so where did y'all come down? On top of that canopy or somewhere off?
We came right down through it.
Right through it.
Right down through it. That's why I say we did not hit anything. That's why I think the downwash from the rotor of the helicopter probably blew that vegetation down and away from us as you went down. I don't know.
So when you landed, then what's your procedure? What do you do then?
We hit hard.
Okay.
You know, it slowed the rotation. He pulled all the pitch he could, but then it stopped and we fell.
This was back. It made your back.
It hurt my back. You know, I was sore. we crashed, rolled over on its side, the helicopter's destroyed. None of the three of us were shot. None of us were wounded with the 30 cal fire. None of us were hurt. So I stepped out through the front bubble, and I had my M16 still. The other guy gets out, gunner gets out, and we're on the ground, standing on the ground. And of course, immediately we're looking around, as a defense. We never saw anybody, to make a long story short, on the ground. We went over to the bunker that we were looking at that had the roof on it. It was a big bunker, again, about 4 or 5 feet deep. Nothing was in it. It was a little L-shaped thing. And the aircraft commander, again, he was an experienced scout pilot. He'd been shot down before. He takes his M16 and he does kind of a John Wayne thing. Goes around the corner and goes, in case somebody was around the corner. And nobody was there. So all this time he's talking to the Cobra on the emergency, we had emergency radios. And of course the Cobra watched us go down, and the Cobra came in and hovered over us to see what was going on with us, which I give him a lot of credit too, which might have scared away the guys that shot us. Because the Cobra came down, he was hovering over us, trying to see us, and provide cover if he needed to. The minigun could have fired if somebody was right on us. So we're down in this bunker. The aircraft commander, he tells me, Jim, he says, go over to that end, watch that way. We're going to be over here at the other end, watching this way. And he was talking to the Cobra, and of course the Cobra talked to our friendlies that were a little ways away. We were on the ground for almost a half hour, 45 minutes, sitting in this bunker, waiting for the friendlies to walk into us, and then we'd walk out with them. So I'm just sitting there watching, my direction. Again, just starting to think about what just occurred. We'd been there, like I said, and this is what got us our Bronze Star, is the ground action. Bronze Star is for ground actions. As far as that's worth. Again, I had nothing. Again, I had nothing to do with my survival.
Was it kind of surreal that all this time you've been kind of the eyes in the sky, and now you're standing there?
Now I get to see what it looks like from the grunts. You couldn't see from here to the wall. It was that thick. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just looking for some kind of movement. So all of a sudden, like I said, I'm looking that way, and all of a sudden I turn around, and there's about 12 or 13 guys standing up around this bunker, our friendlies. I never heard them. I never knew they were there. Of course, the aircraft commander was still on his emergency radio, and he knew and that's probably why he had me looking that way, and he was to where the friendlies were coming in.
Because he would have shot him.
Well, it shocked me. I looked around. These guys I never heard of. They were that quiet. And they're just standing there looking down at me, And we walked out with them.
So where'd you walk out to?
We walked out to this area, where Huey could land.
And then they picked all you guys up and brought you
Huey came in and picked up the crew, took us out. Before we left, we destroyed the helicopter. They put a couple of incendiary grenades on the back seat, which is where the fuel cell was. So we set about 3 incendiary grenades, pulled the pins, set them on it, and that burned through and exploded. And it blew up the helicopter, and because it wasn't recoverable, it was completely destroyed. So they flew us to that field hospital. Went in and got checked out. The nurse checked me out. I said, they asked, "What's anything the matter?" I said, "Well, my back is sore because we hit hard." And that was it. Take a day off, go out to the same area. This time, the unit is in contact. I'm with a different scout pilot now.
Oh, okay. So 2 days later.
2 days later.
Wow.
And this is day 5 of you in the scout?
Pretty much. So I go out the new scout pilot. Unbeknownst to me, usually when you got shot down, you take a week off and go to Vung Tau. Vung Tau was a kind of an in-country R&R site over on the coast southeast of Saigon. Very secure, remote areas, beaches. That's where he went for R. He took off and went to Vung Tau. Nobody told me that. And I'm not sure I could have gone any. They probably wouldn't let me go anywhere, being that dude.
Right.
But he went and spent a week in Vung Tau. But so I'm with the new scout pilot. The unit's in contact. The guys we were with, these guys, are in contact in a firefight. And they wanted our scout, my scout, to fly along their line to help determine how big a unit they were in contact with. So each one of their ends would pop a smoke. You know, here's the end of our unit, here's the end of our other unit. We want you to fly along the front of us, get an idea of what we got in front of us. And the guy was flying and says, "This sucks." He says, "What I'm going to do is we're going to get up to about 100 knots, which is all that scout could do, being loaded." He says, "I'm going to get up to 100 knots. We're going to do what they're asking. We're going to fly along their lines, and we'll get it done." Well, we started taking fire, and you know, 100 knots, we probably took fire maybe only 5 or 10 seconds, but for 5 or 10 seconds at 100 knots, that's a lot of fire.
Yeah.
And they shot our engine out. After we landed, we found out we were on fire. The engine was on fire on the way down. But this time, we had a big open field to turn and go into and land. And he was making an approach into the open field, and it quit flying again 10, 15, 20 feet. He tried to pull pitch to cushion it. This time we hit even harder.
Oh.
We hit hard enough to spread the skids so that we're laying on our belly. And I didn't know that. I didn't know we were laying on our belly, because if you land on the belly, the rotor blades of a Scout are probably about this tall.
Oh, yeah.
I got out of my seat and I stumbled and fell down. And I fell on my back, and I looked at the helicopter and I looked up and I said, if I would have stood up, it would have whacked my helmet.
Yeah.
Another chance occurrence. So I fell down. We get on again. Nobody was shot. Believe it or not, all three of us got out with no wounds.
But this was 2 days after you just had crashed.
Yeah, yeah.
So were you thinking at this point that your odds of making it back home were
Not
pretty
yet.
small?
Not yet.
Okay.
I do have to say, there was another part of the story growing up that I remember, as he told me that he saw each of the bullets coming and ducked out of there. That's what I remember.
Instinctual,
Right.
This was a 6-year-old.
I
Right.
would tell all my friends.
No, I didn't duck out of the way, believe me.
But basically what they did, if I can do a recap to make sure you understand this, is they had you guys run a gauntlet to draw
take
fire just to determine what the force they're facing was.
Yes, we did that a lot.
And I think what you said earlier is the pilot said, "This sucks." I think that sucks. That would be, no kidding.
We knew a lot, the Scout pilots did what they were asked
Yep.
of, and they knew a lot of it was extremely dangerous, and a lot got shot down. Some were killed. So that's what we did. We go in, we hit hard. We hit really hard. This time there's bad guys in the tree line not too far away from us that are shooting at us. And we had little mounds. They could have even been ant hills or some kind of mounds we were behind. But we were far enough out, we had no Hueys in the area. So believe it or not, the Cobra came in, expended his load of rockets on the tree line to put their heads down, expended his turret so he could lighten his load. He came in to pick us up. He landed, waves at us, and we went over to the Cobra. Again, we put down the 2 ammo bay doors on either side. The gunner sat on the other side. I sat on one ammo bay door. The pilot of command, believe it or not, got up on the rocket pod and sat backwards and rode it like a horse.
You are.
And he pulled us out. He flew us out.
And now you've got another 600 pounds on the Cobra trying to lift.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys just kind of clung on to the Cobra and then flew out of there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my.
And that's what they said in the book, as it was coming in, nobody at the base knew what the heck was flying at
Here
them.
they see these guys coming in with 3 guys hanging on the outside of a Cobra.
That could not have happened all the time.
No, never happened.
Wow.
That's the only time I think it ever happened.
Well, how scary.
But that's all that could have been done. If he hadn't come and picked us up, I'm not sure we would have survived that either. So he took us to the closest fire base, landed, dropped us off. Huey came in, picked us up, and we went to that same med center, the hospital area. I went in, and I had trouble walking. My back was killing me. It was sore. I walk in and I saw the same nurse I saw 2 days before. She looks at me and says, "Weren't you here 2 days ago?" I said, "Yep." So they looked at me, they took x-rays, and I had a curvature in my spine. that the doc wanted to see what would happen. So he puts me in the hospital with a board under my bed to keep it straight for a week. He says, you do that and we'll take more x-rays and see how serious it is. So I'm in the hospital for a week, laying in bed.
And a board.
That's when I'm thinking about everything that just occurred and what I had 11 and a half more months to deal with. Again, I was kind of frantic. I just thought, what am I going to do? How can I go back and get another scout? I didn't know what I was going to do because, you know, it's not like you go back and say, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
You just do what you're told. I went back to the unit. Unit commander calls me in. He says, Jim, he says, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get another scout pilot that wants to train you. And he said, you know, we had a policy for scout pilots, 500 hours or 6 months, whichever came first, you could get out of scouts, fly anything you want. And he said, I think you kind of created another policy. If you're a new guy and you get shot down twice in 3 days, I think you can get out of scouts. He says, I'm going to put you in the gun platoon. And I just about dropped over. I said, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And I flew Cobras for the rest of my tour.
I would say that that was a well-deserved promotion or lateral promotion.
Yes.
I mean, because
I couldn't have gotten in a scout and flown as an aircraft commander in a scout, knowing what had happened to me and how vulnerable you were. I don't think I could have been an effective scout.
And is there an element? I mean, people can be superstitious. You may not have been able. Other pilots may not have wanted to fly with you. They may have thought you were a bad luck or a black cat or
That's
something.
what he was jokingly saying.
Right.
He said, I don't think nobody else would have carried me.
Right.
They would have trained me.
Right.
But that's kind of what he jokingly said. I don't think. But that was his intention all along, is to put me in Cobras. He wasn't gonna, because I couldn't fly for. It was probably still a couple of weeks. My back was so sore I couldn't climb up and bend over to get in the front seat. But it turned out what it turned out to be was muscle spasm was pulling my spine out of place, and it went back to normal. So I was good to go.
Good. You lucked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem at all. So that was my scout career, and I flew Cobras the rest of the time.
How long were you laid up?
Oh, a couple weeks. You know, just because I was so sore, because the gun platoon commander kept saying, Jim, when are you coming back? And I didn't know you had to get cleared by the hospital, or things were so lax there compared to a civilian environment. I didn't know when I was coming back. I said, as soon as I can bend over and get in the front seat, I'll come back to work. He says, okay. It was only a week or two. I can't remember exactly. But that was this area.
So when you transitioned to Cobras, you had a guy in the front seat.
Well, I went to the front seat first.
Okay, and then you worked your way up to the.
I worked my way up to the aircraft commander in the back seat, because you flew front seat again for 2.5 months.
Okay.
Watched how you fly the mission, because it was a complicated mission. Because we had 3 radios. You had an FM to talk to the guys on the ground. You had a UHF to talk to the scout, and you had a VHF to talk to the Air Force FACS. And the FM you also called artillery. So you had to be, a lot of times you were functioning with all 3 of those radios at the same time. You'd be talking to the ground, you'd be talking to artillery to bring in fire, and you always had your scout that you listened to. That was your primary concern, was the scout. That's the back seat of a Cobra. That's what the sight looked like. See, there's a little plexiglass thing right here.
Yeah.
And the sight's superimposed on it. So that's supposedly where you pointed that, where you put that on the ground, that's where the rockets were supposed to go.
Was it pretty close? Or?
It depended.
It depended.
Because the pods had to be sighted to that sight in the aircraft. They had to be bore sighted. So they had techniques of doing that. Some were good and some were bad.
Gotcha.
A lot of times we'd shoot a rocket, see where it went, and just adjust. You know, if you were low, you just bring the nose up a little bit and shoot a couple more rockets, because you could shoot multiple rockets at a dive.
So you could shoot individual rockets or like salvos.
When we pulled, when you pulled the trigger, you usually got one from each side. If you held the trigger, it would just go shoot the whole load.
I didn't know that.
And you could shoot the whole load in 10 seconds. Which the armorers didn't like that too much, because they had to rearm it when you got into it. Here's an Air Force FAC. That's an OV-10 Bronco that the Air Force forward air controllers flew. They were always in the air. we always had their frequencies. So if we had something we wanted their jets to shoot at, we'd call them. And they were very responsive. And this brings up the body count. If you told the FAC you had something, the scout had something, you'd mark it, the jets would come in and shoot, and the scout would go back in to give them a BDA, Battle Damage Assessment. Well, you didn't want to call 2 F4s out of Benoit and come and shoot for you and tell them, nothing, you got nothing. Couldn't let it happen. You always tried to give them something. Sometimes they just blew a lot of people away.
Yeah.
Sometimes there was nothing. So you give them a body count. You tell them, you guys get, thanks guys, you got 3 KIAs, possibly 10. There's the scout has blood trails, so we'll give you 10. And they go back and they call in, they got 10 KIAs, and we call that the brigade. That's in our unit. Take that procedure, multiply it by every ground unit, every air unit in Vietnam. You have tremendous figures that would probably just fantasy.
Yeah.
The body count's a lot of fantasy. Scouts a lot of times would see blood trails and call it a KIA, which it probably was. But that's how the body counts went. Extremely exaggerated, many times not.
Yeah.
And that's the bombs going in that the jets put in. The Willie Pete or white phosphorus is a marker that the FAC put in, and the brown is the bomb. So you can see how close the jets put it in there. They were good.
That's
The
amazing.
jets put the bombs where you wanted them to.
Oh.
Here's the next thing we had available to us, is the B-52. I was probably at Benoit when I took this picture. It was a good lead up to my next one though, which is a B-52 strike.
My goodness.
That's what they would do is at 30,000 feet fly, or 20,000. 3 B-52s in formation would fly together. They'd all drop together. And that's as a result of maybe, I don't know the dimensions anymore. Probably a 1.5 miles long and 1/2 mile wide that just saturated, that rectangular area. And that's the way they drew it on our maps. We knew when we went out that a B-52 strike was going in these coordinates. Here we drew a little square on our map, and we go out and watch it go in. That's what we're doing here, is wait until it went in. As soon as it went in, we put the scout down, and he would start working the perimeter. And as the smoke cleared, he'd work closer and closer into it and see what damage was done. Give him a BDA. And again, that's another one. When a B-52 strike went in, you like to give them stuff.
Yeah, right.
You're talking a lot of money, a lot of expenditure. This is this is probably a different one.
It's like a cauldron. I mean, it's this.
Oh, we did. Scouts would have people walking out of this with blood coming out of their ears, nose staggering, a lot of bodies. And believe it or not, I don't know what percentage, but a large percentage of the time that we put our scout on a B-52 strike, he would take fire.
No kidding.
Because they would set up in the perimeter of these B-52 strikes, knowing that we were coming. It's like they had the rectangular mark on their maps. We took fire many times, BDA and a B-52 strike, believe it or not. That was one of the more hazardous times. The scouts knew that, to BDA a B-52 strike, believe it or not, because we took fire so often.
Yeah,
out of the edges.
From someone who didn't serve in the military, that seems counterintuitive.
Yes.
You would have thought you would have wiped everything out, but
Yeah.
the enemy, they're smart. They could adapt too.
They're smart. They knew we were coming.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe the impact of these B-52 strikes. I watched one go in. We had a road, rectangles on the other side of the road. So the scout and I are just doing the lazy eights, just on this side of the road at 1,500 feet, waiting for the strike to go in. And we watch the strike go in. I'm looking out my window like this, watching these bombs go in, and it's shaking our helicopter.
I was going to ask you that. You'd feel the concussions from that.
Absolutely. We felt those go in. And when we went into Cambodia, B-52 strikes were going in the night before. And we were 40 miles away, and we could feel it. We could feel the ground. And of course, you could hear it.
My God.
It's just massive what they put in.
Oh, jeez.
Just a lot of bomb craters.
Yeah. Is
A
that?
good saturation of an area.
Oh.
There's the results of a lot of our scouts.
Oh man.
Mm.
I mean, how many planes were all patched up? How many planes had?
Well, this one I don't think probably was.
No, that looks like a loss.
I was ready to
That was a
go.
loss. Believe it or not, the second one I was shot down in that we landed in the field, they went in the next day, provided security and lifted it out with a Huey, took it back to our base, this base. I don't think this was mine, but for all I know, it could have
It
been.
may have been.
Because one of the crew chiefs came to me and said, Mr. Thomas, he says, we just brought your bird back in. You want to come and look at it? I said, no. I mean, I was scared to go look at it. He said there were bullet holes in the back of the seats. And
He goes, I know, I dodged them all.
I did not want to go look at it. I was,
You couldn't walk. First
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I did that too, but I was scared to death. I mean,
yeah.
So I guess I was referring to is with all the with everyone shooting at you guys, whether you're a scout or in a Cobra. I mean, was it common to see these things where they patched up bullet holes and you
Yeah.
know? I mean, you saw that in World War II with aircraft. They just
Yeah.
kept patching them up, sent them in. Would have been the same thing here?
yeah, they would, and I've got pictures of them. They'd sling a Cobra back that took fire, or a Huey, or a Cow. They'd take them back to a rear maintenance area
Okay.
and work on them. And then we probably wouldn't get the same one back, but we'd get another helicopter.
Jeez.
Uh,
Yeah, look at that.
That's a Cobra lost tail rotor. He hit so hard. That's not the picture. There's the picture. See the transmission right here?
Yep.
See the crack?
Yep.
This transmission is what lifts the entire helicopter. It's connected at 4 points and it goes up to the main rotor system. So you know that's strong. He hit so hard that he cracked that transmission case. They survived.
That's amazing.
Here's them lifting the Cobra out to take to the maintenance area. Chinook could pick those up.
So apparently our maintenance capabilities were very robust
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
to bring back things like that, and yeah.
Our maintenance guys were amazing because we flew our helicopters, Cobras, from sunrise to sunset. There were some days that I never shut the helicopter down. We'd rearm and refuel while we were running, and I'd never get out. You'd get out and take a leak on the side, and get back in, but you'd never shut it down. We ran for 12 hours. And when we got back in, they'd pull maintenance all night on those helicopters. It was amazing with the hours we flew. Our unit commander that we had when we went into Cambodia, the troop flew more hours in those 2 months than any other unit had ever flown in Vietnam.
That's amazing.
That's what helped him get 3 stars, I think, eventually.
Yeah.
Outstanding commander.
Well, can you share his name?
Yeah,
Who is it?
Paul Funk.
Paul Funk?
Yeah,
Is
his
he-
son.
FU1K. Yeah.
Okay. Does he live in this area?
He lives in Montana, I believe. No, he's not in this area.
Okay.
His son, believe it or not, is a 4-star general today. He made 3 stars. His son's made 4 stars. Always hopes to have dad being a 4-star, or a 3-star. But he was probably the best commander I ever had. And I had the year I was there, I'll bet I had 5 or 6 different troop commanders because they rotated them in and out because you had to have command time. And Alpha Troop, first of the 9th, was a prestigious unit to command.
Yeah.
So guys wanted it. And this was the best one. Some were just horrendous commanders, just terrible.
Yeah.
But that's the Army, that's the military. You got good commanders, you got bad commanders.
Yes.
You got good CEOs, you got bad CEOs.
Yeah.
This is one of the Cobras that went down. Believe it or not, you see how the turret dug the trench there, he hit this, turned over. Both these 2 guys survived. I think it might have sent one home, but he lived. But
I mean, wait.
And
How common were these crashes? Like, were they?
Cobra's not very often.
Yeah.
This was kind of unusual. Scouts get shot down frequently. Cobras, gosh, this could have been the only one besides mine. I went down, I got another story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question, why are you on the ground at this point?
That's a good question. I might have flown my Cobra in just to look.
Just to have a look.
I think this was our opportunity flying this helicopter. You know, gosh, I don't know. You know, at that time, gosh, I don't know. Good question. I have no idea. Can't remember.
Don't funk
I
though.
didn't-
That's right.
Anyway, he survived. That's the only friend I had in the unit. We had a lot of those. So award ceremony, they would they'd call it impact awards. So if we had something going on in the AO, the next day they would have an award ceremony and pin awards on people, which was saying a lot. I mean, and that's General Putnam, this 2-star general commander of the First Cav Division. He would fly in and pin medals on these guys, and that meant a lot.
Yeah, you needed that, I'm sure, for, you know.
Keep the morale up
Yeah.
and
Keep them
everything.
right up, yeah. I mean, that was a big deal to come in and immediately, you know, the next day,
Yeah.
have the general of the First Cav Division come in and pin your award on you. When you got short and you were going home, Cobras usually made a flyby. If you see these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Cobras in formation. They're coming out of a dive. We'd get up to about 3,000 feet and dive toward the flight line and fly with a flight line at about 190. And if you see 5 Cobras flying at 190 over you, it's pretty impressive.
That would be awesome.
All the enlisted guys would come out, throw smokes, watch you fly over. And when a guy was going home, you'd do that for him.
That's cool.
I don't know if you've ever heard helicopters in formation all in a group, and I miss when being a kid, obviously, mostly in Germany is where I remember, I guess Fort Rucker, Alabama too, but nothing is more impressive than that. I mean, besides then you got the military band playing too, but to have 10, you know, helicopters flying, it's just
Their big, huge
unbelievable. Or more.
rotors and
Yeah, they're noisy and especially the Cobras.
And you can feel the boom, 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 you know, it's just amazing.
That'd be cool. And
But look at the profile.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, that's a thin
Yep.
profile on. There's a little better shot of it.
Yeah.
It's only 3 feet wide,
Yeah.
which gave it
3
a
feet.
slim profile, you know, for obviously taking fire when you were diving at it, but you felt very vulnerable when you were diving in to take fire off the nose. That's what the front seater was good for. They liked a guy that was 6'2" sitting in the front seat because he was a good blocker.
That's what you say about Tony in front of the bike.
Yeah.
That's right. Great
Some of
draft.
these are just odds and end pictures. That's in the culvert.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This documentation, this visual documentation that you have is pretty impressive. What caused you to bring a camera to Vietnam and capture it all?
I wanted to take as many pictures as I could. You know, I started off with just a little Kodak camera, which a lot of those scout pictures were. Then I bought a Minolta SRT 101 from the PX, which is a big deal then. Then I had a 35 millimeter. A lot of the later pictures were taken, and I just wanted to take as many as I could. And I'm fortunate that I had this many. You know, that,
I grew up watching him on slides. We'd have a slideshow. He'd set it all up. We get dark, and we'd have popcorn, and you go through slides.
You know, I wanted to
A lot of people don't have
through
this.
and,
Yeah.
Because I think you have to have a lot of forethought. You know, you're trying to survive,
Yeah.
trying to learn how to fly a plane, survive a crash, multiple crashes. You know, and you still took the time to.
The pictures from the scout, that was obviously before I was shot down. I was just enjoying the heck out of it. I didn't take
Smile.
any pictures from the scout after the war.
Yeah.
When I flew in the Cobra, for the first month I flew in the Cobra, I would squirm in the front seat as we were pulling out of a dive after firing something. I was expecting to get shot down again.
Wow.
I was just expecting it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you figure, like, so he was a photographer, and some people, like Jerry Boyle, who wrote the book, he was busy writing every single night.
Yeah, he would write letters. You know, I would write letters to my wife saying, you know, it was hot today and sunny, and I never wrote her a thing. She never knew I was shut down until I went to R&R.
Or it was actually in the newspaper of the local paper back in Riverside.
Oh, that's gotta make your wife
Well,
happy.
they had.
That's how she
they
hears
had-
about
when
it.
They, when they gave me a Bronze Star, you know, they had a release that you had to release, and I said no, I didn't want it released. Well, they did it.
Ah.
So there's the Riverside paper that said Jim Thomas awarded Bronze Star and the V device for valor.
One of the articles was the day after I was born, but he didn't know I was born.
Right.
Just to get word, there's no cell phone,
Right.
Yeah,
so.
right.
That's another story. But this is another award ceremony. There's my caveat. I still have my caveat. I still.
That is cool.
I get inspired when I do slideshows and wear
You should have worn it here.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, that was my call sign was Apache 25. When a new guy made aircraft commander in the Cobra, you had to take a call sign. You had to pick a call sign. And I flew a guy named Paul Fody in my front seat quite a bit. And it was kind of an honor to take somebody's call sign. You know, I took the call sign of somebody that I enjoyed flying with, and I liked the way he did things, and I took 25. So Paul Fody came to me and he said, "Hey, can I have your call sign when you leave, when I make aircraft commander?" And I said, "Sure." But I put this on my door and said, "Here's the real one."
You can take it after I leave.
Yeah. But also after I left, Paul Fody was killed.
Oh.
And in a Cobra, believe it or not, which again didn't happen real often. That's a reorientation field, what do you call it? Re-education camp.
Oh,
that
really?
The South Vietnamese had for POWs.
Huh.
For NVA and Vietcong. I don't know what went on in there. These are, like I said, just kind of a lot of times here's our blues and Hueys would sit at this is a remote fire base. There's artillery pieces here, and that's a 130 dirt strip that a 130 could land on. But a lot of times our blues would deploy to a forward area, sit on the ground until they were needed, until the Cobra AC called them and said, "Hey, we found something. We want you guys to come out and look." And they would launch them and go out and do a ground recon of an area.
Nice.
With their cap, yeah. This is when I'm getting ready to go home because I'm not wearing a flight suit anymore. I'm fatigued. That's probably within a day or two of going home.
Did you? What the heck? Some local wildlife?
Yeah, it's an Asian palm civet cat.
Okay.
One of the guys picked it up in the market in Saigon.
Did you experience? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
He's
ahead.
pooping.
Oh yeah, that's what it looks like.
He was friendly.
Did you experience what I've read a lot about people with a short timer thing, where you did you get more concerned about getting into danger as your time
You did,
went out?
but the longer you were there, the more experienced you were. So when something came up that required more experience, guess who they called?
Yeah.
The guy that had been there the longest. If you had a night mission to pull out some long range patrol guys that were screaming to be pulled out, I went out.
Yeah.
Also, my next story is I became an instructor pilot for the unit. While she was being born in October,
Yeah.
I was in Vung Tau going through an in-country instructor pilot course in Cobras. So when I came back, I would be the unit instructor pilot.
Huh.
Which brings up this picture. Actually, I'll get back to that. I had an engine failure. So this was probably the end of October. And again, I'm going home in February. So I'm through most of my tour, and I had an engine failure. We were flying quite a ways out of Song Bay, just on a visual reconnaissance mission. And this is all swamp, entirely swampy area. This is on one side. On the other side are rolling hills, which is where the scout was doing his mission. Just little mounds, kind of rolling hills. I'm making a left-hand turn, so the mound's over to the right, the swamp is to the left. And I had a compressor failure. It's just a bang, and it quit. And we were 1,500 feet, and of course it started going in. And you know, from the time it quits till you get on the ground is probably 15 seconds, 15, 20 seconds. You know, it didn't take long.
100 feet.
In and out of rotation.
Yeah, drop like a rock.
So as soon as it quit, I was intent on two things. Number one, picking out the landing area. And if you see right here, that white That's a rotor blade sticking up from the water. It sank.
Is this him going back to take the picture the next day of
Yeah,
his
this is the next day
helicopter?
I went out to see where I really landed.
Okay.
There's a better picture on the next one, but
I don't see a place to land.
That's what I was thinking.
rotor blade's right there.
Right there.
Right. That's where he landed, I guess.
As we were
But
flying
you're right.
over this, I'm thinking this is a swamp, and I'm thinking my John Wayne movies that I saw with Weissmuller, where you're wading through the swamp with the rifle above you. That's what I thought this was. Turned out those are not bushes; those are treetops, and it's about 40 feet deep, 40 or 50 feet deep. So as soon as it quit, I'm intent on two things. Number one, we had what we call the low side governor failure, and I was looking for that because the RPM would go to a certain point and stop. You could go to emergency governor, full pitch, and fly out. So I'm looking at that again, stupidly thinking, hoping that that's what it is, and it wasn't. Next thing I'm doing is concentrating on the area I'm going to. I didn't want to go into rolling hills. I thought, well, this is a level swamp. It's just water. We'll just land. It'll sit on the ground, and we'll be fine. So I picked that, and I didn't say a thing. Again, I was so intent on working and landing in this area. It was an open area. I didn't say anything. The front seater says, "Are we going in?" And I said, you know what I told him? I said, "Wait a minute." Because I'm still watching the rotor, I'm still watching the engine RPM, hoping it'll stop. I just said, "Wait a minute." And he got on the radio and called the scout, because the scout was still doing his mission. He didn't know it yet. He says, "We're going in." And the scout says, "What? You're going to fire rockets?" He says, "No, we're going down. We've got an engine failure." So the scout immediately pops up, turns around, gets us in sight, and follows us in. This is a better picture.
So what was that
This
landing?
is-
That's the road.
This is the
Yeah.
open area I was looking for. That's the rotor blade. And again, this is after I went to the in-country instructor pilot course. So I had been doing auto rotations. We'd do 10, 20 a day into a sandy area. So you could have no ground run. So you'd have to zero it out. And again, when you do an auto rotation, you come down, lower the pitch. The rotor RPM is maintained due to the relative wind through the rotor system. You maintain normal green RPM. As you get down near the bottom, you go into a flare, 20, 25 feet. That helps build rotor RPM when you do that due to the relative wind. And then as it starts to come down, you level out, wait till it comes down, pull pitch, which puts pitch in the blades to slow your descent. And then as you settle, you pull more pitch. You finish with the collective pitch all the way in your armpit, and you've got full pitch in the blades, and you have a soft touchdown. And we did countless of those into a sandy, soft area, so you could have no forward ground run. If you had a forward ground run, you took over. So I was proficient. I couldn't have had an engine failure at a better time.
Right.
I'd been doing so many, and again, that's the reason why I didn't cause any damage to the helicopter, believe it or not, except water damage.
So you were able to.
I zeroed it out, came straight down. As we settled in the water, I pulled pitch, and we just very gradually stopped. Of course, it started to roll. It won't stay upright. I thought we might be sitting on the ground, and we weren't. It rolled to the left side, and I thought, of course, I had bled off all the rotor RPM. By that time, the rotor was pretty slow. One blade came down and skipped, and then the next blade came down and stopped. And it wasn't a jerky stop at all because the blades were slow enough. I'd done it correctly enough. And
How deep was the water there?
40 or 50 feet.
So that.
Because it sank out of sight.
So-
What happened?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to. I'm like this kid at the edge of his seat. How do you?
Do you want my story or do you want his story? I'll take
We're laying on the left side, and we're floating. And on a Cobra, the front seat opens, the canopy opens that way, the back seat opens to the right. And I rolled it. I wasn't trying to go either way. I'm just trying to hold it upright. It rolled left side. My front seater accuses me all the time. You rolled it to my side, so I couldn't get out. So I got out and I opened my door. We had breakout knives. There was a breakout knife up on the console, a big heavy metal knife that you break the plexiglass with in an emergency. So I got out, and by that time he's taking his and breaking the plexiglass, and I'm chopping it. And we get out, and we're standing on the side of the helicopter. And I thought, again, we were laying on the ground. Well, in this area, it was a bad enough area where we had a Huey above us this time. We were flying a purple team. And we had a Huey flying above us for the whole mission. He would have been out there the whole 2 hours, and he just is up at 3,000 feet, just twiddling his thumbs for this, or getting shot down, or getting the scout shot down. That's all he was there for, with a load of blues on board. So he started coming into where we were laying and maneuvering in to keep from hitting any of those trees and to pick us up. And started blowing water in the cockpit. And as it blew water in the cockpit, we're standing on the side. We pulled everything out. We did take our chest protectors off. Still had survival vests on. But it just very slowly sank out of sight, and we're sitting there swimming. And he's not too far away with a tremendous rotor wash blowing in our face. And we swam over, grabbed the tree, and by the time I swam over and grabbed the tree, I'm exhausted. I mean, it was, because you got your boots on, you got your uniform on. I mean, if it'd been any distance, again, I don't think we would have made it. But, so then he's hovering in close to us. The blues throw a rope out to us. He doesn't want to get too low. So they throw a rope out, and the blues are looking down at us going like this, climb up the rope.
You're like, I can barely hold on to this tree.
I'm barely holding on to the tree, and I'm just shaking my head, saying that's not going to work. And finally, the guy, again, to his credit, the Huey pilot, worked it in enough where we could get on the skid, get into the helicopter. And that's what that picture is. It's Charlie Cochran and I, our flight suits were still soaking wet, and we'd just gotten back to the fire base after being picked up. And
the old,
that other photo.
Oh, okay.
yeah, let me get back to that.
Yeah.
It was just after that.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So full circle. So that's you guys,
That's a
Soaking wet.
and that's why you look so clean and everything. 'Cause you just
And
Took a bath.
I still see Charlie Cochran at reunions.
That's amazing. I mean, first off, awesome piece of flying. Secondly, how tragic would it have been to have survived a landing like that and then have drowned?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That would have been, and it happens all the time.
It could have been a real occurrence.
Yes.
And that was the one where you have the clock still.
Right.
Oh.
One of the guy that wrote the book, when they pulled my helicopter, they pulled it out the next day. Believe it or not, CH-54, if you're familiar with what that is, it's a flying crane.
Mm-hmm.
They use it for firefighting a lot nowadays. It went in, and the maintenance guys dove into the water, rigged it up to be pulled out. The only thing they couldn't do was they couldn't tie the main rotor down to the tailbone, which is what they usually do when they lift it out. So as they lifted it out, it started turning and banging into some trees, and that's caused some damage. Because again, I didn't cause any damage other than water damage. It's like pat myself on the back for
Yeah, no, that's great. And
Actually,
How long was he your front seater?
he probably flew my front seat. We had all the new guys flew front seat. He probably flew my front seat 5 or 8 times. Believe it or not, he got out of Cobras and went to Scouts.
No kidding.
probably
By
after that
choice.
experience.
A lot of guys wanted to fly Scouts. He wanted to fly Scouts, and I flew cover for him a lot of times. Some guys volunteered for the 1st of the 9th too. They wanted to get into that unit and fly Scouts for him. It's beyond me.
Where's Charlie live now?
He lives in Jacksonville, Florida. That's one of the drums. That's a 40 millimeter. That's 20 millimeter shells. But there were drums on each side. That's the way they loaded the minigun and the 40 millimeter. They'd roll them into the drum to load them, and then as you fired, just unrolled and came out through the turret.
Wish you had a little ink pen there for scale.
This is a bum towel. This is while I was at the Cobra IP course. You notice these are their Cobras they use. You see how clean they are?
No patches in them.
This is what you call rear echelon.
Yes. No dirt.
You ever heard the phrase a REMF?
Oh yeah.
That's a rear echelon motherfucker.
That's right.
That's what these guys were, the instructors that taught us.
Yep.
Nice, shiny, new Cobras.
Yeah.
When I went back to the unit, I went to squadron, and we had a squadron SIP, which was a standardization instructor pilot, who was supposed to give me a check ride to bless me for being a troop IP. I went to squadron, and he came out to pre-flight the aircraft. He looks at it, we did the pre-flight, walks around, he says, "I'm not gonna fly in that, I'll sign you off, but I'm not flying in that." That was the way a lot of our Cobras were. Anyway, a lot of this is fun time.
So was this the first time that you, since you were deployed, you had a chance to get?
Yeah, that's the only time I got out of the troop.
Yeah.
Was to go to the IP course, and I went to Vungtau. That's the only time I got anywhere. We never got out of the troop. Scouts did sometimes, because you couldn't take a Cobra to go screw around. Scouts could take a scout and fly to Saigon for a National trash mission or something, or fly to Vungtau for whatever. Cobras, you couldn't do that.
Right. A big gunship flying over Saigon.
This is another unit. This is a French rubber plantation that they're in the middle of. And you see this is a big unit. These are all revetments for the helicopters. It's probably used. It's probably a lift unit. There's another picture of it. Just a rubber plantation in the middle. These are just...
How were when you went to, was it Bentau? Is that you pronounce it?
Vungtau.
Vungtau. When you went there, how were the locals? What sort of things could you guys?
Well, they were very friendly.
Yeah.
You had to be on orders in order to go into town, because the MPs would check anybody at Vungtau to make sure they had specific orders that they could go there. So yeah, the locals were friendly. Again, they were in a secure area. That was an extremely secure area.
Yeah.
These are just that's more flight line.
What the?
One of the scouts shot a deer, and the scout landed and loaded the deer. These are two ex-hunters here that dressed us.
Two guys from Michigan.
The CO about shit when he found out the scout landed out in the AO in the middle of nowhere to pick up a deer. We did some dumb things. There was that was Lowell. That was his name. He was friendly.
Wow, you could pick them up.
I know, I would
Yeah.
never think, oh, I'm gonna pick this wild animal up.
I think I got a picture of him sitting on
Bit you and
somebody's,
you have rabies.
sitting on somebody's shoulder.
Huh.
Monty Johnson was another Cobra pilot. He trained in my front seat for.
What are those vests? I haven't seen those vests before.
I'm sorry. That's why we took the picture. We thought those vests were so neat. It was to put a survival radio in the side right there.
Yeah.
Those are Air Force vests where they carried their survival radios. That's was an Air Force survival vest. That's the only thing they carried is a survival radio. So we thought it was neat. We got a couple of those and took the picture. That's Jared Boyle, the guy that wrote the book. You see the old flintlock. We took that out of one of the caches.
And he just died 5 years ago?
Yeah, he died about 5 years ago. I think he might have had lung cancer. There's a CH-54 right there.
Yeah, the hollowed out
Yeah.
grasshopper.
Yep. A lot of caveat shots. That's the back, again, that's the
Rain
perimeter.
season.
This is out the back door of my hooch, and again, that's the perimeter. We never got hit many times here either. I don't know why. It just didn't happen. Artillery. Carl Rosapep, I still see him at
Yeah.
reunions.
The ever-present pinup girl, which someone put a mustache on, I think.
He's
Yeah.
actually in his pictures in the book also.
Yes, yeah.
The book.
It's my coffee table.
Nice.
Somebody, I don't know who painted that, but it was pretty impressive. That's Jared Boyle. 20mm again. Again, that's the door I sat on. You can see it's got little metal suspension cables there. So I sat on and held onto that suspension cable.
Just like they designed it for, right?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna put these here for someone to hang on to.
Yeah, we'll call them ammo boxes, but they're really ways for people
But again,
to.
we were at 1,000 feet, and I'm sitting on the outside, and I'm
That's
thinking,
exactly what I was thinking.
the other thing I'm thinking then is, we're gonna get shot down again with me on the outside.
Please do.
So, they were sitting on his shoulder, doing something. This shows the helicopters there, they're filthy. I mean, they were just filthy. This is one, we only washed them one time, and I think my year I was there, this is the only time I remember we ever washed them.
Really?
Yeah. This is Thompson Hood, I believe. And that's a North Vietnamese, not North Vietnamese, South Vietnamese camp. Compound, put it that way.
Did you do much support for the South?
No.
It was all for the
It was
first.
all for the U.S.
Yeah.
We did not support the South Vietnamese army.
Hmm.
Some units, I'm sure, did.
Right, but
we,
not yours.
We had, again, our whole mission was reconnaissance.
There's the ox.
This was early on. There's a guy plowing his field, and we wanted to take a closer look.
And he's probably like, what the?
Here he is, wondering what is that? He's watching us, and we're circling about
He's like, "Go away."
200 feet above him. I was in the front seat taking this
He's thinking
picture.
he's gonna get shot.
Right.
This is when I was a new front seater, and the aircraft commander was just, we were goofing around and wanted to see what this guy looked like close up, and he was, I'm sure, a little bit apprehensive.
I would bet.
Yeah. Wow.
Here's an overnight base. You see these 4 APCs?
Yeah.
Those are armored personnel carriers. They would come into a night location, just like this, push up the dirt around them, and that'd be their night location.
But that to me looks like heavily scarred by bombs, though.
It is.
Okay, so they would.
It was.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
But
Already
again,
been bombed, ABB.
Yeah.
we had some armor units that we did support. There were tanks out in the AO that we supported sometimes. A lot of times we would work out in front of an army unit. They'd fire all their guns and stop. We'd put our scout down to see what they did and pull our scout back. They'd shoot the tank some more. It was pretty impressive stuff. That's just another fire base or another artillery battery. Again, no, there wasn't any ground unit that moved in Vietnam that didn't have fire base support. They always made sure they moved those fire bases and temporary fire bases, to make sure they supported. If a unit, a brigade or a battalion went out to do work, they would make sure they were covered by artillery.
And how soon could they build one of those temporary
They could do it in a
bases?
hurry.
No kidding.
That was a little bit more, but you saw the pushed up deal. A lot of times they go into a fire base, just push it up, sling load 155s or 105s in, drop them, boom, that's their forward base to support the ground guys. Yeah, that's just another picture of the back seat. That's the Vietnamese compound. I think this is it. That's it. That's the last slide.
This is amazing. I've never conducted an interview where the veteran had photos like this ever. Maybe a couple here and there.
Well, when we have
Yeah.
our reunions, guys always bring their albums and look at pictures, and not many have this many pictures. I just took a lot of pictures.
We were trying to get a reunion here in Colorado, and we were even looking at Old Town Golden, but it's so
It was just too
nobody
expensive.
in Golden would give us a break. We went to a couple different hotels that were trying, big enough to have a conference room and affordable, because a lot of these guys are on really fixed incomes,
Yeah, a lot
and
of them.
so most of the they're in New Mexico or DC
We
or
had in Albuquerque.
Montana.
Our next one is in Tempe, Arizona, my old stomping ground.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, it
We're
has to
having
be someplace that's really affordable.
Yeah, we're having that reunion in September in Tempe.
How well they attended?
Pretty good. The COVID problem with the last one wasn't attended as well, but a lot of times we'll have 50 or 60 guys from the troop, and of course their spouses, so we might have over 100 people, 105 people. So we get pretty good participation. And this is everybody. This is enlisted guys, our maintenance guys, our blues, pilots.
Well, it should be. I've been incredibly impressed at how the tactics for this new type of recon and warfare,
Yeah,
using helicopters, evolved,
yeah,
and having all these different units mutually supporting each other.
oh yeah,
That must have been. Was that comforting for you when
Oh,
you were
absolutely.
there and you saw all this?
absolutely. You know, you knew if you went down, you were going to be picked up.
It's a big deal.
If possible. It's an absolute big deal. We had a siren in the troop area. If an aircraft went down, that siren went off and everybody ran to the Hueys. They cranked up and they were out there in 5 minutes, en route to where the downed aircraft was. And they would put the blues on the ground to secure it and to pick up the pilots, whatever that was possible.
So you ended up cycling out of the theater in February
February of 71.
'71, and
Yeah.
so what happened after that?
I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama as an instructor.
Yep.
I started off in the OH-6s, get back in scouts.
Love them so much.
So I instructed in a course, transition course for OH-6s.
You went back to college.
Yeah, I went back to night school, went to Troy State University and got my degree.
And by then, my sister was born.
Yes.
Oh,
So now he has two.
Yeah.
wow.
So I finished my degree in business, just because I had to get a degree. That took me 2.5 years going to night school. But so I finished that up. I was an instructor there in OH-6s and the UH-1s also for 3.5 years. And believe it or not, guys that had been there longer than I, that was 71 to 70, 71, 2, 3, 73. Guys ahead of me were getting orders to go back to Vietnam. So I started worrying about getting orders to go back. Because once again, I didn't think my survival chances were that. Again, I was still thinking, I'm not going to survive if I go back.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I didn't. It just didn't happen. It wound down enough. You know, by 73, 74, they were pulling troops.
Weren't you in Fort Rucker at the same time as Al Gore? Wasn't he there?
Might have. He went
I
to
thought
Rucker
that,
for
yeah.
something, yeah.
Hmm.
About the
believe it or
same
not.
time.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the heck out of that, being an instructor. It was fun.
Was it? To me, it seems like an incredibly amazing resource when you have someone like you
Yeah.
come back and help instruct people.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so was there an appreciation from the people you were training that, hey, this guy's been there, I need to listen to him?
All of us, all the IPs were in Vietnam. We came home from Vietnam, and we taught courses. We didn't teach initial entry courses. In other words, the guy in the Warrant Officer Flight Training Program, we didn't teach those. The military instructors that I had when I went through, yeah, they were awesome. I enjoyed talking with them and flying with them, and they could teach you a lot. Of course, everybody we instructed knew the experience we had, and they appreciated that.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
How long did you stay in the service?
20 years.
So where did your career path take you after Vietnam?
I spent 3.5 years at Rucker IPM, and then I went to Iran. I spent a short tour. After being in a stateside tour for 3.5, 4 years, you were due to go on a short tour, unaccompanied. Usually it was Korea. I had a friend of mine that was in Iran as an instructor, and he said, Jim, if you got to go on a short tour, come over to Iran, because it was a year tour.
A short tour is a year.
Yeah, that's a short tour. It was a hardship tour, what they call it, and it was unaccompanied. You couldn't take I went to Esfahan, which is south of Tehran. Couldn't take your family.
And we were in Georgia.
Yeah, you went to Georgia. And I was an advisor to the Iranian army. I trained their pilots. And I trained in all 3 aircraft that they had. They had OH-58s, which is the Bell 206, Jet Ranger. And I instructed in Hueys, and they had the J model Cobras, which is a twin-engine Cobra. And I instructed in those also. So I spent a year there.
So you were there, 5 years or so before the Iranian Revolution?
Yeah, 74 and 5 I was in Iran. The Shah fell in 79.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was fully in power, very secure. Pilots were great to work with, other than having trouble with English sometimes, and they all had to speak English because that's the universal aviation language. And the culture is obviously different, but it was extremely interesting. So I spent a year in Iran instructing them. Then I went to Germany. We went to Germany for 4 years. It was a 3-year tour. We extended an extra year because we enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, that was June of '76. We went there,
Yep.
and then left summer of '80.
Cool.
Yeah,
And of course, the whole family was
Whole
there.
family was there.
So,
We were all there. The kids.
And we're still friends with the people that
That we-
lived in
we,
their home,
we lived in their home downstairs, and the landlord lived upstairs.
off the military base. We were in a
Yeah,
village.
in a village.
Yeah.
And where were you stationed?
Illesheim, Germany. It was near Ansbach, not too far from Nuremberg.
Yeah.
24 kilometers from Nuremberg. Good tour. I was gone a lot. You know, we did a lot of training, playing war games, and because we were the first defense against the Russians coming across. So I spent 4 years there, and then we went to Hawaii. We went to Hawaii for 3 years. Again,
pretty good duty.
enjoyable tour.
I had a little different experience than everyone
Yeah,
else, but that's all right.
That's a whole
Was
nother.
not good
Just
duty for
because
you?
of the schooling
Whole
system
nother
and the
story.
grade that I happened to be, I wasn't allowed to stay on post. I had to be bussed off
Civilian.
post.
Probably the
Great.
worst
Mm.
schooling we've ever encountered.
It's the
in
highest murder
military.
rate in the islands of Hawaii is Wahiawa,
Oh my
where I went to
gosh.
school.
Murder in paradise.
Yeah.
The schools were terrible.
Yeah.
So I spent 3 years there, and then I went to my last tour, 4 years, 84 to 88, was in Chicago. I went to the Fort Sheridan Flight Detachment.
You did go. We went back to Fort Rucker though, in between Hawaii and
Yeah.
Chicago for 10 months, so that he could get his fixed wing.
I had schools, I had the Warrant Officer Advanced course. I had the Warrant Officer Senior course, which is a 6-month course. They're military courses. And I went to an Instrument Examiner's course, and that's all at Fort Rucker. And then, like she said, I went to, what did you just say?
We went back to Fort Rucker for 10 months in 8th grade.
Oh, for the fixed wing. I got a fixed wing transition finally. When I came home from Germany, I talked to my branch assignments officer, and they ask you what you want. And I said, well, I want a fixed wing transition, and I want to go somewhere that has a C-12, which is a Beechcraft King Air, twin engine turboprop.
Then he could get hours.
And again, I was a CW4 with a lot of experience, and the assignments officer was very receptive to giving you what you asked for if it was at all possible. And so he gave me Chicago. He says they need a Huey IP, which I was. We'll send you to the fixed wing course. They've got 2 C-12s, and they've got a U-21, which is another twin engine turboprop, a little smaller. So that was my last assignment, is flying fixed wing out of Glenview Naval Air Station. That's where we parked the airplanes. We had,
You also flew helicopters.
yeah,
still
we had 2 C-12s,
during
we
that
had 2
time.
helicopters. It was VIP. We had 2 shiny helicopters with carpeting in them, and we supported the generals at Fort Sheridan. There were probably 6 or 7 generals at Fort Sheridan. Plus, we supported the Navy at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. We supported the Admiral and some of his staff. Flew them all over the country in the C-12.
And from another point of view, so I was swimming by then, and whenever we, competitively, and he would come over, he would fly over. Kid you not? We'd all be like, "Hi, Dad," from the pool.
Well, the post at Fort Sheridan was very small, but it had a helipad. So a lot of times we'd pick up the commanding general or the colonel that commanded Fort Sheridan, pick him up on a helipad, fly him over to Glenview, put him in the fixed wing, and fly him to Florida or wherever we had to go. So I spent 4 years flying the King Airs. I got 2,000 hours in a twin engine turboprop, which is what you needed to go fly for an airline, and I was lucky enough to get hired by American. And I flew for 19 years with American, and retired as the captain on the MD-80.
Did you have any close calls as an airline pilot?
At American?
Yeah.
No.
Thank God. Because we fly those, so or fly in them.
He did go back to instructing in helicopters and had an engine failure.
Oh.
After
on the
retiring
side.
from American.
Well, no, that was while I was still working for
Oh, were
American.
you?
I went out
Okay.
to the local airport because I wanted to rent a helicopter. Just take my wife. My wife's never been in a helicopter. I wanted to take
I've
her.
never been in a helicopter.
Yeah, I wanted to take
I mean,
her.
I've sat in them.
But not.
Never
Never
left the
flown.
ground.
We could never take them, but I wanted to take her, so I went and asked if I could rent one. He said, no, we don't rent, you can't rent a helicopter. He said, but we need an instructor to work part-time to fill in on weekends for our guys. We're working too many hours. I said, fine. I got my IP rating current, and I worked part-time for him, instructing in the Schweitzer, which was a trainer that we used in the Army. So I was instructing in that, and one day I had an engine failure in that.
Did you just walk away and say, I'm done with this?
Well, I was teaching the guy how to do auto rotations.
How to crash land.
And I was doing simulated engine failures, and I'm over a big open field. I was made sure we were in an open field, and I said, I'm going to do the first simulated engine failure. And he said, okay. So I rolled the throttle off, put the collective down, you start your auto rotation, you check your engine RPM and your rotor RPM, the two things you check. Well, engine RPM was just kept going down. And I told him, I said, we're taking this all the way to the ground. And I said, the engine quit. And he looks at me and he says, can't you restart it? And we were only at 1,000 feet. And once again, by the time he says, can you restart it, we're probably at 400 feet. So, once again, I just auto-rotated and make a good landing, no damage whatsoever. We got out, just like in your car, you pick up the hood and look at it. I made sure there was no...
Put your thumb out.
I made sure there was no oil or something, nothing obvious, and there wasn't. And I said, well, you got two choices. I said, we can try to start it back up. And I said, and if it starts, I'll fly it back. And you can either go with me or you can walk over to the house over there and call a cab or whatever. He says, I'll go with you. Believe it or not, we started it back up. And I flew it back. Maintenance looked at it and he says he thinks it was a combination of a low RPM setting and not enough carburetor heat. It was a piston engine, so when you rolled the throttle off, you had to pull carburetor heat on to keep it from quitting. And evidently, I might not have pulled enough hot carburetor heat, or the idle was set too low. And that's all. So it was minor. So I landed it fine. But again, after that occurred, I'm thinking, I'm working for American, and I'm thinking, what if I would have balled that up? That could have jeopardized my American career, even though I did get permission. I made sure the chief pilot in Chicago knew I was instructing in helicopters, because you had to do that. So yeah, I quit not too long after that.
So have you flown a helicopter since then? Since quitting that gig?
I have not. No.
Okay.
He had his own Cessna for years.
Yeah, I had my own plane for 20 years. I had a Cessna Cardinal that I flew.
Cool.
How did you end up in Colorado?
Well, I'm
He's
not.
not.
I'm still in Chicago.
He's
Oh, are you?
visiting.
Yeah.
Actually, hopefully they'll be here in the next few
Yeah,
months.
we're trying to move. I'm waiting. What's the name of the stone?
It's Springwood.
Springwood. It's
Just
a
up at
retirement
64th
community,
and Yank.
Oh, yeah.
55 plus community,
Yeah.
and they've got all levels of care.
Yeah.
And my wife needs a little more. She's okay now, but I'm anticipating that she could need more care. But anyway, we're waiting on a
You
duplex.
took her up in a helicopter too many times.
We're waiting on a duplex there, so when the one's available, we'll move here.
Yeah.
So we had some follow-up questions, if you don't mind. Tim,
Oh,
you want to go first?
absolutely.
Well, there was one for sure that you had talked about having to go out on a night mission to pick up some lerps, but you were a Cobra pilot.
Right.
So
I was covering.
okay.
Yeah, it was 10 o'clock at night. Ops guy comes in, Mr. Thomas. He says, we got a mission that there's a LERP team out, and the long range patrol had probably 6 guys that would go out and sit and just monitor. They never wanted to get in contact because they just were to monitor. Well, it turns out they had blown a claymore. When they in a night position, they would put claymore mines, little claymores out in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
They heard movement and they blew a claymore, and they blew it on a tiger. And the tiger is out in the woods thrashing around.
Like a tiger, a
A
large
tiger.
cat.
Bengal tiger.
Oh my gosh.
And it didn't kill him, it just pissed him off really bad. And so they're on the radio
We have
calling.
tigers in the story now too.
So they're on the radio calling back to their commo guys, screaming and yelling, "You got to pull us out of here! You got to pull us out of here!" So I went out with a Huey, and I was to cover the Huey. As he went in, as they got to an LZ that was sufficient for a Huey, And again, this is 11, 12 o'clock at night by the time we got out to him. Here he goes in, picks him up, takes him back to the base. And again, I was just there to cover him. And again, that's when I'd been in country 10, 11 months. Again, I was the go-to guy because you're the IP too. You're the instructor. You're the most experienced guy we got.
Mm-hmm.
After 10 months.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Again, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And so you didn't bring the blue team out?
No. No, because they had no contact. I guess they had not seen anybody, so there was no anticipation of contact, so they could get to an LZ. Did not anticipate contact, so that's why we didn't put any blues on the ground with them or to get them out.
Did they know it was a tiger?
Oh, they
Did
heard
they?
them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. After they blew it, yeah, they knew it.
So the tiger was trying to come into their perimeter.
Evidently.
So that sounds like a threat to me. It sounds like something that would have
Could use some
It's enough
claymore?
to scare me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that alone is like, what are we doing out here?
Yeah.
And those long range patrol guys that was some pretty.
They were highly trained guys.
Yeah, harrowing
and
stuff.
Did a lot of hairy stuff.
Yeah.
Again, they would try to just observe, but a lot of times they'd get in contact, and that's when again we would go out and put our blues on the ground to meet up with them as a bigger force and help pull them out. A lot of times our blues would get in contact also. And the concept there was they would try to maintain contact with whatever size force it was, and while they were doing that, we would call back, and they would call in another battalion, like if we supported the 1st to the 8th, which is a battalion-size infantry. They'd send a couple of companies out, put them on the ground close, walk into our blues, link up with them, and then we would let our blues go back while this larger force continued to contact with the enemy as a larger force. Because our blues were only to establish contact and until they could be relieved. So we would pull them back out. And like I said, we would put our blues in 2 or 3 times a day doing that. They'd get in contact, we'd put a bigger unit in, we'd pull them out. They almost never spent overnight. They hated spending overnight because that was their job, is just establish contact. Or if they didn't find anything, we'd pull them out. And they never had to spend the night generally.
Interesting. I didn't know that they had forces that were doing this type of recon.
Yeah.
When you think back to your time in the service, what sort of things kind of burn the hottest? What sort of things do you remember the most after all this time?
Probably all these stories, obviously, are what I think about more. Probably Vietnam is what I discuss more, and with our reunions, getting and talking with those guys really brings up more stories and things you forgot. And I met an enlisted guy for the first time a year or 2 ago. He said, I was in the Huey that pulled you and Cochran out of the water. I said, you kidding? He says, yeah, I was sitting in the Huey pulling you guys out of the water.
Because that would have been just as memorable for them as it was for you, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and this is very therapeutic for them too, because it's like my mom's brother, when he came back, Uncle Ron, their brother-in-law, he got out of the Army and nobody wanted to hear anything. Don't talk about it. It's over. It's done. And those are the guys that just went crazy.
They had a hard time just, staying in the military. Everybody I worked with, like I said at Rucker, were Vietnam vets. We'd have a party once a month and we'd tell war stories.
Yep.
And you sit there and talk with each other about it.
And here they are 50 years later, still having reunions.
Still talking
Yes.
about it.
I
Whereas
think it is.
if you came in and just went back on the street and went back to your normal life, that was a tough transition. When I tried to tell my mom, I said, let me tell you about me getting shot down. She said, no, you don't want to talk about that. You don't want to talk about that. And so I never told her. She didn't want to hear it. And I think that's typical of what so many people ran into going back home.
So we heard about it.
Yeah, they heard
growing
about
up.
I do think it's good medicine. There's a lot of World War II vets I met who followed that unwritten code of you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And they suffered with PTSD for 60 years.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what happens is like their spouse will pass away, so they start reconnecting with other people and they talk about it.
Right.
And every vet that I've spoken to who had some issues with the transition said they wish they had talked about it more
Yep.
when they got back. That was the thing that helped them get through it more than any other thing.
Yeah.
Especially like you're saying at these reunions.
Yes, and I think that's why, again, I got through it so well, is just staying in the military. Everybody you worked with ran into the same stuff. I tell my story about getting shot down twice in 3 days, and you talk to a guy that was shot down 5 times. So you think, well, I didn't have it that bad. It's just...
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question. How can you experience these sort of things, any one of which would have been a life-altering event for an average person and what they experience? How could you experience these multiple times and then come back and care about the minutia of day-to-day life? How are you able to kind of put that off to the side? I mean, did life seem kind of boring after that?
Not really. I didn't have a problem. I don't know how. I don't know how that occurred, but I went back to Rucker and instructed. It was a good job, and I guess I kind of put Vietnam behind me, even though we talk about it with all the guys I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any problem whatsoever,
Yeah.
and I still don't have a problem today talking about it. It's.
I don't remember anything like him being missing or zoned out or anything like that.
No, I didn't have any problems that I thought. No.
It sounds like that is probably good medicine. It sounds like something that hopefully we're doing more with, with our current vets.
Yeah. Well, we had, at our reunions, we'll call people that haven't come to the reunions and try to get, networking and stuff, especially with Facebook and stuff. We find new guys that haven't been to reunions and say, hey, we're having a reunion, come. And a lot of them are reluctant to come. They don't want to. They're afraid to come. And but without a doubt, everyone that gets to the reunions saying, boy, I wish I would have come sooner. And it's therapeutic.
Yeah, for sure.
I've had the honor to go to 3 different reunions and interview veterans there, and everyone said what you just said.
Yeah.
Every single one. And there's
Absolutely.
every year, because there's one reunion I went to 4 times, and every year there was those new ones that just kind of said, okay, I'm going to go to this now, and all of them left better than the way they came.
Every reunion, I still see the guy I was shot down with the second time. And I tell his kids, I say, your dad is the reason I'm here today, is because of the job he did getting us out of there. And the first one I got shot down with, unfortunately, I've never seen again, and he was one that checked out. He's the one that was shot down numerous times. He was the craziest scout pilot I've ever seen. He seemed invulnerable. I mean, he, at least the way I saw him. And he was shot, I don't know how many times he was shot down, but I guess when he went back, he just checked out entirely. And the last I heard, he was a monk in a retreat somewhere, and that's it. He just completely checked out. Just couldn't accept what he'd done, because again, scouts had more of a hands-on, watching their gunners shoot people, and possibly landing at another scout crash, and seeing the result of that. Probably one of the more traumatic things that happened to me, regardless of me getting shot down, was when I was flying over a scout when I was an aircraft commander, and he took fire, nosed over, crashed, blew up, and killed all 3 of them. And that I was stunned. Just nothing you can do. And I went back to refuel, and I thought, don't we need to stop here or something to do? 3 guys had just been killed underneath me. I said, I just thought everything should stop and take a break, have a little
process what happened.
Have a little memorial
Because
service.
how many times have you seen somebody die in front of you?
Have a memorial. I just couldn't believe it. I was stunned, and I just gassed up, went back out, and flew another mission, and nobody said a thing. We never had a memorial service that I remember in the unit.
So you celebrated more when you were going home than your death.
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of ironic or dumb.
I just have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
One is, do you feel comfortable commenting on how some of the Vietnam vets were treated after the war?
Once again, I personally didn't see that
Right. but
because I was living in a military community.
Right.
I was living in a civilian community that the post supported. They all worked for. They all did something on post.
Right.
So they were very receptive, very friendly. I never had a problem. I came back through Travis. My wife picked me up at Travis. I never saw anything there as far as demonstrations. I never put a uniform on until I went back down to Fort Rucker on post as a part of my job. And that was never a problem. The Fort Rucker community, the entire surrounding community was entirely supportive. So again, that's a different situation. I get asked, I've done some high schools, and kids will ask me, what did you think of the Vietnam demonstrators, of them demonstrating? I said, I don't have any ill feeling about that whatsoever. I think, what if they hadn't demonstrated? How much longer would that war have gone on if there hadn't been the demonstrations? Because again, it finally came to light, and I guess my light bulb didn't come on until I read Nixon's book and McNamara's book and Westmoreland's book to find out how stupid those people were.
Interesting.
They were just Westmoreland. If he was in front of me now and I had a gun, I'd shoot him.
No kidding.
Because all he could do with Nixon, he said he'd go back to him one year and he'd say, "Give me 50,000 more troops and I'll take care of this mess." The next year he goes back and he says, "Give me 100,000 more troops and I'll take care of this." Then he went, "Give me 300,000 and I'll take care of this." He should have been the one that knew what was going on.
Yeah. And
stood on Nixon's chest or Johnson's chest or somebody and say, we're not going to win this. I became more discouraged 40 years after the war when I read about everything.
He reads about a book a day. And
That's
I'm not
great.
kidding when I say that.
That's awesome.
I've read everything written about it, and it's discouraging and disgusting. And
do you think it had an unintended positive consequence? Did it force the military to be more introspective? And do you think that may have played a role in some of that, at least the tactical successes we've had since then?
You mean the demonstrations?
No, do you think that the mistakes that we made in Vietnam, do you think we learned the lessons from those as a military?
Evidently not.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was going with that.
The only time, you look at Afghanistan, and after the Russians were there and we think we're going to go in and do something different, how can we be so dumb? The only smart thing I ever saw was the first Bush in Kuwait. That was the way you fight a war.
Yeah.
You just bomb. What did they do? Bomb for a month? And then go in with overwhelming force. That's the only way you fight a war.
Yeah.
We could have done that in Vietnam.
Yeah.
But then that's a whole nother discussion, because then they worried about, are the Chinese going to come in if we go north, if we go into Hanoi, if we bomb.
It couldn't have made you feel particularly good as a Vietnam vet to have seen what had happened in Kabul. And you know what I'm saying? When it's like, my gosh, didn't we just do this, 40 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I'm glad I didn't have a son that went in the military, because I know how ignorant they can be. Our leaders, unfortunately, and some of the military leaders. Again, the military leaders we had during the 90s Gulf War, first Gulf War, were just outstanding. And it's the only way to fight a war.
And now his grandson is 21.
I tell Chris, I said, I was your age when I was in flight school. Next year you'd be going to a war,
He's just thinking about football,
It's really hard to imagine that. I have kids and they're 19.
Yeah.
And that's when my dad was in Vietnam.
Well, I don't think he doesn't quite comprehend
He has no
that
idea.
No.
I don't have any idea. I mean, I get it a little bit more, but Chris has no idea.
Yes.
He can't. It's not fair to expect that he would know, you know.
Totally. I get that.
But I don't fault the demonstrators, I don't think whatsoever. They had a valid point. I just think, how come they were smarter than I was back then? Why didn't I protest at ASU?
Yeah.
Why didn't I figure out that we shouldn't have been there?
Because then he had to go to jail too, or go to Canada.
Yeah. You know, I didn't have that.
But then you
He's a
wouldn't-
rule follower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim, did you read Neil Sheen's book about John Paul Van?
About what?
John Paul Van.
Yes.
What did you think of that? Because his trajectory of how to approach Vietnam militarily changed over time.
Gosh, I read it so long ago, I don't remember. But you've seen the movie We Were Soldiers.
Mhm.
What's the name of the road?
The Audrey
There was
Valley.
the journalist that wrote that in the Yadrang Valley. Anyway, he also was enlightened, you know, about what was going on. A lot of the
Hal Moore.
Hal Moore.
Hal Moore was the
Yeah.
colonel.
Yes,
right?
Hal Moore was the colonel.
Said book by Hal Moore.
But anyway, you know, there were a lot of people like that, both in the military and journalists that saw what was going on and probably just as frustrated as anybody about that. We're not seeing it. You know.
And Joseph Galloway.
Joe
Yeah,
Galloway.
Galloway.
Yeah.
That's who it was. Yeah, it's a good book. What was the thing? Two parts. What was the thing you learned in training that best served you in country?
Probably my first flight instructor I ever had at Fort Walters, Texas. He was a retired Marine Corps major. And he thought he was still in the Marines, which they always are, I guess.
Yes, they are.
He was not friendly. He was very difficult, but he taught me how to fly a helicopter. Like I said, he gave me a hard time. So many different instances when he would get frustrated and take his gloves off and throw it in the bubble and say, Thomas, he says, you don't want this very bad, do you? When I was screwing up. But he taught me more, and this is just in a little two-place trainer, about how to be a helicopter pilot than any instructor I ever had. Because he would put me, I remember one time putting me in front of a tree out in the middle of nowhere in Texas. And and right in front of a big old tall tree. And he says, okay, he says, take off out of this. And these weren't very powerful helicopters. He says, you take off out of this and don't bleed off any RPM, because you bleed off any RPM and you're going to be in trouble. Well, you start moving and you start moving forward and you start to panic, and so you pull more power in. But all that does when you don't have it is to start to bleed our rotor RPM off. And so I wasn't doing what he was telling me, you know. And he grabs it, takes it back, sets it down. He does it himself. Takes it off, does it. And he says, "See that?" He says, so many times in Vietnam, I watched guys crash when I would go into an LZ and take more guys than they could take out, just because of what I'm telling you now. You know, fly it the way you're supposed to fly it. Don't get excited, and you can do a better job with a helicopter that way. And he taught me more than anything. He probably impressed me more than anything. And I didn't particularly like him.
And not to diminish that story, but this explains a lot. And when you taught me how to drive a stick shift car, and you put me on a hill,
Yeah, I was just thinking
and
that.
said,
Don't
"Go."
stall.
This totally just makes sense right
It's
now.
about the same thing. Yeah.
Don't mess up.
The second part to the question is, what experience or learning did you have in country that best served you back in the States?
Oh gosh, so many. Flying a helicopter requires a real delicate touch. You have to be smooth, or else you can't do a good job with it. And that carried over into American, because you've got pilots that have a smooth control touch, and you got some pilots that just yank it around and don't have that smooth touch. And flying helicopters taught me that touch. Because the Huey, the cyclic in a Huey is like holding a wet noodle in your hand. There's no feel whatsoever, but you have to be extremely smooth and make minute movements. And that carried over to the entire flying career. Fixed wing, American.
Landing.
It made me smoother. Yeah. And I wouldn't accept anything that wasn't smooth, because I'd fly with some American pilots, believe it or not, that would be coming in and they'd be doing this, working the wheel like this. And it wasn't necessary. All they had to do was hold it still.
It's like they saw that in a movie somewhere.
Yeah,
So that's
like the word, if I
Mm-hmm.
work harder, it'll work better. So that carried over. Just control touch, which is kind of simple, but that carried over to all my flying.
Is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't had a chance to cover during this interview?
Gosh, we've covered a lot.
Yes, we have.
I enjoyed that 20 years I spent in. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed. I enjoyed being a warrant officer. Because if you're a commissioned officer, you have your initial tour in the cockpit, you fly. But after that, you have to start checking some boxes. You have to have command time. You have to have troop level command time, company level command time. You have to be brigade staff time. You got to go to the Pentagon for a while if you want. You got to make some connections with a general if you want to be a general's aide, which helps you. That's what you do. You get out of the cockpit and you're not going to get back in. But a warrant officer, their career is to be a helicopter pilot. You're the technician, and that's why I enjoyed it. So that's what kept me in the Army.
And he'd also kind of see people, like if we went from base to base, maybe we would follow with the same group of people.
A lot of times, yeah.
That's cool.
Even as kids, I'd go to school with kids. I'm like, oh, I remember you from Germany, when we're in Hawaii or Alabama or something. But
it was an enjoyable 20-year career.
Yeah.
We changed assignments every 3.5 years, every 3 to 4 years, and I'd get with a new group of guys, new 30, 40 other pilots, which was fun. And I had good assignments. That 20 years, those were all good assignments in my mind, other than the first one. But it was enjoyable. I enjoyed it, and that's what helped me get to American. So I can't say enough about that.
Yeah.
Extremely fortunate.
You gotta move out here to Colorado.
Yes.
Come on, get out here.
Yeah,
You spend enough time in the
Trying.
floodplains.
I am trying. I've been trying. I've been here for 23 years, and I've been trying to get him out here.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm glad I had a chance to meet you. So I got a chance to meet your father. This is I love doing this. I got a passion for it. I learn a little bit more about these how people work, how they handle adversity.
Yeah.
I know it's going to sound cliche these days, but thank you for your service, for doing that. I really sincerely mean that. That's not some platitude I say at the end of the interview. I take that seriously.
Well, and you need the real story, because if you listen to a lot of other people that are higher up in the ranks, you're not going to get the right story. You're going to get their version.
I could not agree more.
Well, we have our reunions, and only one commander comes to our reunion, the one that's Captain Funk, who was captain then, who was a 3-star, Paul Funk.
Yeah.
You can Google him, and he was in the Gulf Wars as a general, commanded a brigade. He's the only commander that comes to our reunions, and so that tells you, number one, about him, and number two, about what the other commanders were like that we had.
That's right.
Because they would probably be a little apprehensive about showing up.
Yeah. They kind of flew in, did their thing, and then left, and now they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And if the reunion is ever somewhere nearby, and you don't mind a hanger on, I wouldn't mind kind of going in there, and not to do any of this, or there's no quid pro quo, just to kind of.
Well, it's unfortunate because again, I don't think I'm the best type person to talk to, because other guys had. Well, there's just countless other stories.
You sucked pretty much the whole time. I'm good. What time is it?
Come on. I can't. I don't think there's been a veteran I've interviewed who hasn't said what you're about to say. I really did. I was just doing my job. You know, I mean, I did what I had to do. But I mean,
Well, I just look at the other guys again at the reunions when we're telling war stories, and I may not have been aware of what was going on, or they were at another time, and they did a lot worse stuff than I did.
Yeah.
a
Well,
lot
I'll
of-
tell you, the only reunion I went to was, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 years ago? It was in Albuquerque. I sobbed. I was just sobbing and crying because it was so overwhelmingly emotional for me, for my dad, you know. And so anyway, he's my hero.
Yeah, right.
He did duck, and he saw the bullets. He ducked.
That's right.
I know.
Keanu Reeves says nothing.
That's right. He's
Yeah.
doing the Matrix.
Can't tell me any
I
different.
can't think of much more. I'll tell you.
Well, I'll go ahead and stop tape then.